Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking Podcast. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking Podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. Zachary Pulman heads up interior design company Zachary Pullman Design Studio. Zachary graduated from the Royal College of Art, where he studied interior design, and has created distinctive designs across the hospitality, retail, leisure and residential sectors. His innate style and expertise has made the studio a leader in the competitive socializing design sector. In this episode, we discover the different design approaches to residential and commercial design and how to appeal to Millennials and Gen Z, why it is important to like and enjoy the people you are working with, the importance of designing to help make a business financially successful, and why it's never too late to do a quick redesign.
Competitive socializing is just like a new name for something that's always been around.
Yeah.
Bingo or bowling or darts and all those sort of things. And it's probably got that new name, competitive socializing, in England, because I guess there's a bunch of people that are starting to relook at some of the traditional things and maybe some new things and just sort of maybe make them more specific to certain sort of age groups. A modern version of competitive socializing would be something like, Flight Club, where they've taken the idea of darts and they've kind of fused darts with a really good sort of pub, and they've done a pub in a slightly sort of circus way. So you have pub, circus, and then they've actually brought in sort of really good food. And then, we've got clients that we're working with where they've done it with golf, or someone's done it with shuffleboard, and there's various different games that you bring into that sort of environment, but it's not like the dartboard round the back of the back round the side of the thing. It's a sort of key element to the whole sort of operation.
So they weren't really catered for then? Like they're more like add-ons to another type of entertainment or context?
Yeah, so competitive social. I guess the sort of the one that was kind of almost there all the time was sort of bowling, where you have drinking, food, and an activity. But I think what the new wave of that sort of stuff is where it used to be right on the edge of the city, and it'd take you an hour and a half to get there. Now they're doing them in Zone 1. We've done one underneath the Gherkin. We've done one on Oxford Street, and they're very central sort of premium locations. I think that's what, and then what they're also doing is they're taking all of those disciplines quite seriously. It's not like, let's just put a dartboard in the corner or a bit of mini golf. You try and do all those things really well. And then you also might sort of advance the game by adding some technology into a traditional game. There's an American company called Topgolf who effectively gamified driving ranges. So they developed an intelligent ball. So you could, rather than going to the driving range and vaguely trying to work out how far you hit it, you hit the ball, you know exactly how far you've hit it, you know exactly how many points you've got, because it's turned into a sort of target game. And then they turn that into effectively like you go with a bunch of friends and you actually have a whole evening there, and you get table service, and you've got some decent food, and you've got some nice drinks, and you've got all that sort of stuff. So they're sort of playing around with those things. And then you have, competitive socializing where people are trying to cover all age groups. And then you have other ones where they're much more specific. So with Swingers, who are the golf company that we're working, Crazy Golf People, they're very much sort of over 18s, and it's very much a sort of more millennial Generation Z focused environment.
How did you get into doing that? What was your first project in that area?
We got into that slightly by sort of like, it was a bit random, because I was working with an architect at the time who, through a contractor that he was working with, literally said he's got these guys, they've set up this pop-up, and they'd set up quite a massive sort of, I think it was like 11,000 square feet. It was quite a serious pop-up, basically in Shoreditch. They've got Pilgrim Pizzas in there, when Pilgrim Pizza literally had a camper van and they were squeezed an oven into the back of it. And they'd set up this sort of quite serious pop-up with the mini golf, with really good pizzas. Then they had some really good sort of cocktails going on there. And it was just an absolutely crazy success. It was like literally a sort of queue round the whole of Shoreditch. Off the back of that, those guys were like, well, this obviously works. Mike met them, and they wanted to do a more permanent location, which involved some sort of planning and licensing and, ventilation and all that sort of stuff that goes with these environments. So Mike was very confident in all that, and he asked if he won the job, would I be interested to do the interiors? I said, yeah, great. Anyway, I saw him the next day, and he said, oh, I didn't get the job. And I said, you won't believe it, but I think I bumped into, effectively your client last night. Give him a buzz, give Jeremy a buzz and say, look, I think you bumped into Zach last night. Let's all have a chat together, and maybe you'll change your mind. And so we did. We met literally, I don't think it was even the same day, and we all got on very well. Jeremy and Matt were just about to appoint someone else, and they decided to go with us. And that was our first competitive socializing job, which was more or less underneath the Gherkin. It's a building opposite it, in a basement that had never been used. It was like been empty since like 1920 or something. Incredible space. It was effectively, they were storing some light bulbs down there, but it was nearly 17,000 square feet. It had 5-meter high ceilings in parts, and we turned that into the first sort of permanent indoor mini golf competitive socializing space in London for them.
There's a format that's come through. Did you help devise the look and feel for that, or the actual? Because I'm imagining it's not like your crazy golf at the beach, is it? It's a sort of pumped up and more varied experience, I should think, in terms of golf playing. But were you involved with that, the development of the actual game, or was it more about the ambience of the spaces?
More to do with the ambience of the space. I think they were they'd already got a direction on their holes. It was also quite financially sort of limited at the time. So it was sort of trying to get a lot of bang for your buck. They are very sort of clear on their own brief. Even though we sort of worked it out with them, they're sort of operators that are not interested in branding companies or graphics companies or any of that sort of stuff, which is quite, it's got its own way of panning out. But we helped with them to effectively develop all that stuff, what gets labeled as their brand and that thing. But on that particular project, we did it with them. And they started off life wanting it to be a sort of 1920s glamorous sort of English countryside sort of aesthetic, but on a car park budget.
Right. When have I heard that before?
It was a champagne taste and ginger beer money.
So what did you do for that? What was your approach to tackling that brief?
We'd also come from a world of that where we were doing incredibly expensive sort of high-end personal residential projects where we were spending, I think we regularly spend £250,000 on a kitchen, 150 grand on a shower room, incredible details for everything. And we were very much into sort of perfection and high quality materials and all of that sort of stuff. And then we came to this one and it was like, oh my God, how does that work? But it was sort of, it was basically creating big sort of statements that effectively were cost efficient, which, we we would ended up using a lot of simple materials and woods. It was a case of taking simple materials, MDF, planks of wood, and it was more about composition. So a lot of paint, a lot of wood, simple palette of materials, and then we'd spend, you'd spend the money very wisely. So you'd spend a little bit in certain bits where you touch and you'd feel it to give it the sort of premium feel, and other areas were much more sort of to do with overall effect. We tried to get as much as we could out of what was already there. So it was quite, the space was incredible. It was a very rough and rugged shell. So we tried to contrast with the rough and rugged shell. So it was quite raw, contrasting with the new bits that we put in, and we sort of played up to what we started with as a space.
So you've got that sort of industrial shell space, and then how did you get to sort of integrate the social side of it then into those spaces? Is that difficult with a golf course running through the middle of your venue?
Well, it just takes time. Exactly, because you've got a lot of, you've got a lot of space that goes over to golf, and then, you've got a certain amount of money that you're going to earn out of golf. You've got a certain amount of money you're going to earn out of drinks, and same for food. I think the more you do these projects, the more you kind of understand them. But there you're all socially you kind of got sort of a couple of different social things going on, which I'm sure you probably do in all sorts of leisure. But you've got a sort of corporate sort of scenario going on, and then you've got a sort of walk-in scenario going on, and you're trying to balance those, that you always get the sort of the right amount of energy, that you don't feel like this is a space that's sort of dominated by corporate feel-good day out or evening out. And then there's also quite a strong sort of music element to it. So, that swingers on a, some nights you'll have, people dancing on as they're playing golf. It's sort of like a bit like a nightclub. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, it can be, really sort of jamming sort of place. However, you go in, I don't know, Wednesday at 12 o'clock during the daytime, and it might be a bit more sort of sober sort of arrangement. And then you're also trying to do it where you have very flexible sort of numbers between the whole venue. There's nothing worse than having a venue that feels sort of half empty. So that we sort of got a system now where we can sort of, the way you fill it up is sort of layered so that it always feels full, even though it might be running at sort of 25%.
Yeah, so there's a nice kind of energy within the space that's not reliant on all the people filling it. It's yeah.
And then the sort of relationship between the various different food courts, and then the bars, and then the golf courses, and the positioning and all those sort of things, and then the circulation, and then how you can reduce that circulation. We spend a lot of time how you can get our circulation down to an absolute minimum, because it's kind of like dead space. So we've managed to do that on both courses and on sort of back of house. So I think looking around, we can very sort of spatially efficient plan.
That sounds really satisfying. That's the sort of thing I like to do, is make the most of the space. They're quite, when you go on a train and you see a real golf course, they're huge, aren't they? And they zigzag back and forth. And those same principles of space use must be going on when you're laying them out. You've done a few of them. Is there any difference in terms of how you would approach the design for different locations?
Swingers is very much a company. They're not interested in pumping out exactly the same design wherever it is. They're not a sort of cookie cutter company. So they always try and make them different. You try and relate it somehow to the local market. At the same time, you're trying to keep their sort of DNA running through all the various different venues. So it's sort of like you end up sort of setting yourself effectively some sort of guidelines and some principles that you try and reinterpret per venue in a different way. And then we've got some other clients where they, have been very successful in America, and now they're beginning to franchise out into other countries. And what has worked incredibly successful in America just hasn't worked in other countries. And those ones are where we generally work with a local sort of firm, and you end up with a sort of crazily successful company, and you're telling them, actually, if you open that up in this country, it's not going to work. No one is going to come in. It's just got to be sort of made a bit more premium, or it's got to be a bit more sensitive to the local market, and all, you can't just put in exactly the same thing. It's going to fail. with those sort of clients, sometimes feels a bit weird that you said, I guess that's why they're employing you, to say if you repeat your incredibly successful formula, it's going to fail here.
That must be hard to take, mustn't it, if you've dreamt up this amazing concept. The level of sort of expertise that you've developed over the years, you found yourself sort of specializing in this sector. You haven't always done that, have you? You've done quite a wide range of different projects, but is there a different approach to this particular sector, or has it just been a kind of natural extension of the same type of methodologies or approach to design that you've always had?
With this whole competitive socializing, I think we get much more sort of into the thinking of how do you make these actually financially successful. It's very sort of business driven. There's a lot of risk that goes into these things when you're doing sort of residential work, which we've done sort of on an individual basis, and we've sort of also done on sort of much larger scale mass house building. But they're kind of the sort of economics of those are just sort of, someone wants to spend a certain amount on their property and that's that, and a developer knows what he wants to spend on his thing. But with this, it's sort of, how can you hone it so that you've got the most successful sort of business you can get out of it.
I think there's more of a responsibility to make it sustainable as a business then. You're assuming that role. Yeah, I
think so. Well, you really, it's just you try and understand it and you try and get into that whole sort of area of the economics. You know what I mean? And with a residential project, a client, if they like something enough, they'll spend the money, and that's that. They'll push the boat out. With these sort of projects, it's much more sort of strict. The whole budgeting of the thing, the pace of these as well is just fantastic. It's just a completely different pace. The speed that things get done
in terms of program time,
exactly. We started working in China, and basically we sent over our usual program, and they're like, "That's great. Now reduce that by 80%."
Right.
And it gets done. They remove a certain amount of stuff, and just the stuff that you remove. Okay, we'll do that, and they just do it. It's just amazing. You hear these stories that they're building sort of 1 floor a day in China on these office blocks, and you can see how they do it.
I must put a bit of pressure on the design team.
Yeah, definitely. And then I guess the other thing that's quite nice about working with clients that are doing more and more sites is you're not so wildly precious about each project. You want it to be the best it can be. You realize you have to draw a line at some point, and then you take the bits that didn't quite get there onto the next project. And that's very nice. That is sort of evolving all the time.
We, of course, met many years ago when you left the Royal College and set up. You were working at Spaced Out when that was one of your first sort of companies. How would you say that the design world's evolved in the time since when or your thinking about design and interiors has evolved since graduation?
Spaced Out was something I set up with James Engel when I finished Royal College. I was always getting retail projects to do, even when I was at college. I remember at one point at the Royal College, Diana Casson kind of called me to one corner and said, "Look, you better do some college work," because I was always busy doing retail stuff. And so came out of Royal College, and I was doing retail for fashion brands, and we're doing bits and pieces for Browns. We did some stuff for Sonia Raquel. And it was very much, we're in the days of a drawing board, tracing paper, scraping lines on and off. 3D, what would be a model, foam model.
A real model.
A real foam model, yeah. And maybe with a few bits of materials in there. And it's very much plan, elevation, section. And now we're not there yet, actually, but this year we will switch to Rivet, which will effectively be everything will be starting in 3D. Still on certain projects, you have to do the plan to make sure that works before you move on to the 3D. But I think that's probably the biggest shift, is going from line drawings with your pen, then into the computers, where as soon as you went into the computer, you kind of went into the millimeter grid. And I think that's probably where everyone just went crazy about details because they just could. Yeah. You could just keep on zooming in. And we all got obsessed by all these crazy over-the-top details that probably nobody cared about apart from us. And in detailed terms, we were still probably bad bicycle engineers at best. But we thought that was all terribly important, exactly
That
how.
you talk about program and speed. I mean, it would have taken much longer, wouldn't it, just to do the drawings and the plans and by hand?
Absolutely. And, we do drawings now with the client watching. Literally, we're like, hold on a second. And, yeah, before that would have been, okay, we'll sit down, we'll work that out for a couple of days, and then we'll send it to you, by post. And then,
Yeah.
you can let us know what you think a couple of weeks later. And now it's literally that whole 2-week exercise is done in half an hour. So yeah, massive shrinking of time.
And has that given you more time to think about the work, or have you just do the projects in a shorter period?
Depends on the project. I think when you're into the project, you're kind of thinking about it all the time. And when you're not into it, you sit down and you're like, okay, I've got to get this done. Duration is less, so there has to be less thinking per project. But with these commercial ones, they're sort of ongoing. I think the thinking time actually is going down.
I mean, that must be to do with experience, I would think, isn't it? You know what to do. You've done it all before in many ways. That must help in taking those decisions at those points.
I think the other thing that changes is that you start off life and there's you in the studio and maybe one other person or your partner, and that's it. And then as time goes on, you build up a sort of team, and it comes a little bit more like a sort of team effort. I've now luckily got a really, really strong team, and you're effectively briefing people, nudging people along, going through sort of certain views on different things. But it's different to sort of sitting down there doing it yourself. When you first get going, you have 1 or 2 projects on the go, and you're really, really happy. And then later on in life, I think we've probably got 30 projects on at any one time. So it's always quite a lot of sort of stuff. So moving around those, and you've got various different people on each project.
And are you still involved in the creative side of that then? Do you get enough of that creative design work?
Yeah, very much so. More creative now, because I think we've kind of sorted out all our admin sort of side of things and all of that. There was a phase where that was all a bit painful, but I think the same as sort of, the speed it takes to do a drawing now, it's the same, the speed it takes to do your accounts or your this or your that. It's all, it's all so much easier now. There was a time where that was a bit of a bore, and now it's not. I think email is a bit of a tricky one. Always push for communication via telephone as opposed to email. If you can very easily end up, I'm sure it's the same for you. You have 500 emails on something that could actually just be in a half an hour call.
Yeah, just pick up the phone and thrash it out. Yeah.
Thrash it out, absolutely. And the email's just bonkers. I think, it's almost got to a point at once where we just, it's just too many emails. You couldn't get through them all.
I think it's quite good just to record things, but it's the tone of voice you miss, isn't it? You sometimes get an email and you think, oh my dear, I've really upset this person. Actually, it's just that they've just got caps lock stuck on by accident. In that sort of realm of communications, you do a lot of social media. I came across your Instagram feed, which was nice to see, the variety of stuff you were involved with, but also the kind of content you were interested in and you were promoting. That's something that we didn't have all those years ago. You take a conscious effort to move into that area?
I personally kind of moved out of social media because I just thought it wasn't for me. And then maybe at the same time that happened, I thought, well, let's put that energy into the work side of things. And I think it's actually worked very well for us. The fact that people can plug in interior designers, competitive socializing, and look at various different projects that we've been involved in, and we can, they can find us. That wouldn't have been so possible a long time ago. When we kicked off, I remember us literally phoning up. I think Wallpaper was getting going. I would literally phone them up and say, "Oh, please, can you come round and look at our model?" We've done this project. We'd do it ourselves. And then I remember when they came round, we'd fake our studio and invite a few friends round, so we looked a bit busier than we were.
Really? That's
Phoning each other up.
But now you don't even need to get them round, do you? You just fake the pictures and fake the website.
Yeah. I think that there is a lot of that, isn't it? There's always the fact that your renders actually look better than your finished projects. There's quite a lot of, I can't remember who it was, but I remember someone sent their CV in, and then I looked at their website and I thought, well, why do they want a job? They've done all these amazing things, and they just sort of made it all up.
Images from their portfolio
Yeah, and it just made everything. And could you do a detail of this? And it's like, no, I can't actually do anything. But you look online, it looks like you're running the world.
How do you rise above that then, in terms of if everyone can look so competent?
Important part for us with working with projects is sort of enjoying the people you're working with. It's sort of equally as important as the actual project. And I think when I sort of realized just work with people you like, you'll kind of overcome all of the obstacles. And I think as soon as we sort of got a little bit braver and we're like, okay, well, I think we're not going to get on, let's just give this a miss. If you're in the position where you can turn work down because you think you're not going to get on with the person, I think that's a good move to do. I think as soon as you don't get on with someone, everything's going to be a problem. And it's quite, these interiors and architecture and stuff, it's quite a demanding job. There's a lot going on, especially once they start building and stuff. You need to be able to overcome everything.
I know that when we started, probably the same for you, you'd just take everything that came along, wouldn't you? Wanting to find opportunities and experience. But I think the people thing is really important. I think that's something I've appreciated. And whenever like you say, a problem isn't a problem when you can sort it out with someone that you get on with. It's finding solutions when problems occur that is a lot easier when you've got a good relationship with the client.
Absolutely. And just, we've always been really honest. If we're not going to make the deadline or we've made a mistake and all of that sort of stuff, we just, as soon as we realize we're not going to get there or it's not going to happen or we've made a mistake, we just let them know. And we've never had anything legal happen ever. Of course we make mistakes, everyone makes mistakes, but it's getting through those mistakes. If you're making a couple of thousand decisions a day, a certain percentage of those are going to be wrong, aren't they?
Just not the big ones, hopefully.
We've had a few. We had a staircase go in the wrong place, completely our fault.
So what do you do when that happens then? It's like, what does it arrive on site or?
It was we had to do a very quick redesign of the upper level.
Oh, I see. So you kept the staircase and redesigned.
Yeah, it didn't get moved again.
Painful memory, but mistakes I've made. I mean, I'm always like things like cutting things too short. That's the, the measure twice, cut once mantra, often ignored. I think that's the thing. It's quite a lot to deal with, isn't there, in terms of construction and decision making processes and specification. Particularly, I mean, if you're particularly on higher budget projects, does that pressure become more intense when you're dealing with more expensive materials?
Yeah, we had one where we did this kitchen worktop for this client. And we did this massive sort of amorphic egg-shaped sort of bit of stone, which was 70 millimeters thick. And I think it was like 4.5 meters at one point. And the guys who were going to bring it in, they'd measured and they, before they tried to get it into the house, they had a full-size plywood template just to work out who could stand here, where this person would stand. And they did all of that. And they get to a certain point in the property and it just won't fit in. And the client's sitting there with his cup of tea watching them thinking, okay. And then they just bent the bit of plywood through the space and carried on. And we just looked at each other and we're like, well, you're not going to be able to do that with a 70 millimeter thick bit of stone that weighs 3 tons. So we're like, well, sod it, we'll just go off. Yeah. They've contracted to get this thing in. We'll just go off and see what happens. Anyway, we came back at the end of the day and it was perfectly in. And we're like, oh, how the hell did you do that? And I just removed half of the door over here and sort of went up a bit and just took out
and knocked through.
Knocked it through.
Trojan horse style. There would be a bit of flex on a 70 mil piece of stone though, wouldn't it? But probably not enough.
Not as much as they were demonstrating with the bit of 6 mil plywood. Flexi ply.
I remember we were fitting some stuff to a restaurant and the builder just said, no, if we can't get it in, we'll just knock the wall down and just we'll cut a bit of the wall out. And I thought, well, that's good. There's always a solution.
Yeah.
Not very elegant, but there's always a solution. What's coming up next then for you? we're in obviously in lockdown mode and things aren't so great, but you mentioned the other day that you were working on projects that have got much longer lead time, and assuming things clear up, lots of these spaces are going to be back being used. Is there going to be any different approach, do you think, to how they operate? Do you think it's going to bounce back to some sense of normalness?
If you look at the countries that have come out of lockdown, and then you look how quickly the sort of leisure activities have bounced back, you've got that sort of pent-up appetite for it. And I think the millennials and Generation Z, they forget very quickly. Someone told me a story of, they were working on a space in Las Vegas, and the nightclub next to them on sort of Wednesday, someone went in there with a machine gun and shot down 7 people. And that was lunchtime on the Wednesday, and Thursday by 9 o'clock in the evening, it was rammed again. The socializing aspect will probably bounce back very quickly relative to the sort of age groups. I think people just do forget very quickly or move on very quickly. You're already seeing a sort of collapse of retail spaces in certain areas, and the sort of shopping malls sort of not working particularly well in terms of retail. So, there's going to be a sort of shift around in spaces. I think the shopping mall will change into something else probably relatively quickly. High streets, I think, will change. All the shops are sort of going bankrupt. A lot of that sort of middle-level restaurants are all going to go. So, I think those things were probably going anyway. I think this has really probably accelerated all of that. A lot of work, even though it's tough short-term for all of us lot. I think long-term, medium-term, long-term, it's actually going to be really strong.
You mentioned the Millennials and Generation Z, isn't it? The latest one that's coming up. There's starting to be the main sort of type of customer for your sector, and they behave differently. And is that shifting the way you're having to think about designing spaces at all?
Yeah, definitely. I always thought all those sort of reports about all these very efficient generators, I just always thought they were nonsense. Never really paid them much attention. Now we're kind of in this game. Yeah, there's definitely sort of, with those generations, there's the idea that they're not particularly that interested in possessions. And maybe that's because, I don't know, house prices are so crazy high that, they're not going to have a house. So therefore they don't want to buy furniture. Therefore they don't buy the stuff that goes in the house, blah, 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 all of that. They're environmentally friendly or more conscious. So they don't want to have 100 pairs of tennis shoes. And there's all that sort of stuff going on. They're into their health. So therefore they're not going to go, let's go out and let's drink 30 pints of beer for the night. Yeah. So you've got all that sort of stuff. How does that relate to what we're up to? Maybe you don't need to be open till 3 a.m. Maybe if people are drinking less, they want to drink better quality. If they don't want to have any possessions, what's important to them? Oh, maybe it's the social media, it's the Instagram moment, it's the social network sort of, I've been here, look, these are the sort of key images and all that sort of stuff. So going back to that sort of social media stuff, we've got some spaces that we're designing specifically for 12 different photos within that space. And that's kind of our brief. We need this space to have 12 different Instagram hit photos for 2 years.
Yeah, that's a totally different way of evaluating the space, isn't it?
Yeah, and then you take the same sort of thinking for those customers, and it's like, okay, well, you don't want 30 pints of beer. Are you prepared to pay £7 for a cocktail in a tin, or are you going to pay £15 for a cocktail that's made in this, it's got a whole lot of amazing ingredients in it, and you'll have 1 drink a night or 2 drinks a night rather than the £30. You spend the same amount, but you just spend it on higher quality because you're conscious of your health and you're conscious that you want to be healthy for work the next day, all those sort of things. So yeah, I think they're all sort of beginning to make sense to me.
It's a different way of operating. I look at the students I've got at Plymouth, or even my kids. I mean, they're just kind of connected totally, and they know so much more than I think I knew at that age. I mean, knowledge. Well, I don't know whether understanding just follows on from having some knowledge, but they certainly know a lot more because it's all accessible. If you choose to want to know about something, you can find out about it instantly, and that must change the way in which they operate. Then one has to change the way one designs.
On top of that, you've got the whole sort of sustainable efficiency sort of level of stuff that you try and pull into your projects, which I think when we started, no one cared about any of that. Energy efficient, recycled materials, efficient with the amount of materials you use, lifespan of projects. We've started designing stuff where, as we're designing it, we're thinking, how can you change this space? We try and do a design maintenance thing, but we try and do design maintenance where you're actually changing the components you've already got, rather than strip it out, add some more stuff in. It's more of a sort of shuffling exercise.
So an evolution rather than complete strip out.
And then the other projects where your strip out, you're using the items you strip out as your fit out.
Well, that's quite challenging.
Yeah, of course, it might only end up being a sort of certain percentage of your fit out, but you try and do it.
I remember seeing iconic stores back in the 90s and thinking, this is amazing. And then coming back down Oxford Street three months later and seeing it ripped out and thinking, well, where did that go? I think there's less tolerance of that, really, although there is still quite a huge turnover in those hospitality type spaces, isn't there, of brands.
Prada have done this sort of bank thing with all the money they've got, where they'll lend money based on how sustainable your fit out is in the fashion world. So if you're a fashion company and you want to do your shop, you can, if you're very on it with your recycled energy efficiency, you can get a very good bank load off Prada. It's quite clever.
Got to incentivize it, haven't we?
Incentivize it through cheap money.
What percentage of work are you doing in that sector then at the moment?
Prior to pandemic, I would say 75% of our work was in that world.
Yeah.
Now I'd say probably 50. So we've shifted and we've pivoted into, a bit like the olden days. We're taking what we can get right now.
What comes along. Yeah.
What comes along. So, we're doing from a very small roof extension, terracey sort of thing to a full-on Chelsea house, basement dig, rear extension, another floor on the top sort of thing, residential jobs, which we haven't done those for quite a while. So we're doing stuff like that again now.
And is there anything that you can take from the competitive world of socializing back into your normal design? Into
the residential stuff, I think that sort of getting the level of detailing sort of appropriate to the job rather than overdoing it. I think we've probably in the past over-detailed stuff where it was only important to us and probably quite an expensive way to go about things. So I think we've probably got better at budgets and being appropriate, not forcing things that only we care about. So I think we just basically got more commercial, which is probably quite healthy.
It's an interesting sort of combination that you've gone through, really, from those early days right through to these sort of almost theatrical spaces, aren't they?
Yeah, that's a good description. They are like theatre, exactly.
It looks fun to design. Is it fun to design?
Yeah, it's really fun. It's really fun, and I think it's a pity we had this pandemic because we had a load of projects we always look at the projects that we've just done and go, oh. That's a bit embarrassing. We think they're awful. And then the new ones are going to be brilliant. And I think we are just at a turning point where we're actually going to do some stuff which is a lot more fun. And so we now understand this game, the planning, all the legal stuff, all that sort of stuff. And I think it frees us up to actually focus on the creative side much more confidently now, because we know how to get all the other sort of the back of the house and all of the sort of programming and all of that absolutely perfect, and now we can just have more fun with the front.
Feels kind of playful and fun, like you can bend the rules of design, can you? Or you don't have to be too serious and overly concerned with being stylish or up to date. It has a sense of anything. You can put anything in there, you can have a bit of fun and create a space that doesn't need to fall to the normal rules.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it is quite playful. It can be a little bit cartoony. It's a bit fantasy land. I think that could be a very good idea, though, to do an extremely serious, sensible crazy golf course. But no, it's naturally quite silly, isn't it? No?
Yeah.
But I do like the idea that you do the most serious one possible.
Yeah, like really for the actual pro golfers,
Yeah.
Well, I'll give that one a go, definitely. I was a bit obsessed by crazy golf when I was a child. and would seek out holiday destinations on that basis. But
let's go next time you're in town. We've got a consultant who advises us on actual golf courses, and he is, I don't know how far along the line he is, but I think I think it's something like 900 or 1,100 crazy golf courses in England, and he's at like 95% through them.
Do you play crazy golf then? You must do.
Yeah, it's one of those things you never think you would, and then it's just one of those things. It actually is, when you were a kid or when you're now, it's actually really good fun.
You're sort of hinting at the attraction there. It's kind of nostalgic, isn't it? And what is it that's drawing people in? Is it the novelty, or is it the memory of childhood experience, or just it's a change from the norm?
They're saying that people, you want to have some food with some friends, and you've got the sort of Uber Eats, and you order your food at home and it's done. And so people are more experience driven now. They want more from their evening out. They're more into sort of total experience, more immersive sort of thing. I think that's what's driving this whole competitive socializing sort of boom, the desire for experience. And they are really good fun. I know we're working in it, but at the same time, I go with my cousins sometimes, and you're like, oh, let's go, have a meal somewhere else, and then we'll go here. And it's like, great.
It's great, actually. And it's that kind of like exercise as well, isn't it? I'm always conscious of trying to keep my steps up every day. So a round of golf would help, wouldn't it?
No, I think you're onto something. We should turn one of them into effectively, exactly. When they're not busy, it should be golf gym. I think that's it. That's the next step.
I'd like to thank Zach for taking the time to speak to me. It's really nice to see his approach to competitive socialising and how to create an experience that is immersive and experiential. And the way in which he thinks about the target market is really fascinating. Understanding how the people you're designing for think and what motivates them is clearly part of the process that really makes a difference in delivering the spaces that are enjoyed by that target market. We focus a lot on the user experience, both in my design practice and when we're teaching at the University of Plymouth. If you'd like to find out how to be a kick-ass interior designer, follow the links to the BA Honours Interior Design course at the University in Plymouth. I'd like to thank Dave Clark from I Am The How for production support and advice during the setting up of this podcast. Kay Hansen for our admin and co-hosting role, both on this and the educational podcasts for the University of Plymouth Interior Design course. And Mark Frith for the music. Really like to hear your feedback. Leave a comment or get in touch via the website or on Instagram. In the next episode, we meet Jamie Wilson, Director and Hospitality, Leisure and Culture Sponsor for HLM Architects. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.